Hey, somebody needs to fill her up. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to The Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. This week, the Professional Noticer is sponsored by WisdomHarbor.com. Here are a couple of quick questions. First question, how long has the school system in your state been repeating the mantra, more money for education? And the second question, through the years, as they've gotten more money, how much has changed? Today, families and school systems all over America are finding WisdomHarbor.com's one-of-a-kind streaming service to be the perfect low-cost, high-quality educational tool for their students. Wisdom Harbor's stated responsibility is to create the next greatest generation, starting with your hometown and your school system. For less than $3 a month per teacher, classrooms have access to original content only found on WisdomHarbor.com that teaches, entertains, and builds character in young people while creating conversations between young people and the adults in their community. Utilizing video, audio, and the written word, content is delivered in small bites by Grammy winners, CEOs, comedians, chefs, best-selling authors, and Hall of Fame speakers. There are even guitar lessons from an award-winning songwriter. Check it out today and join your friends and neighbors who are already a part of WisdomHarbor.com. And isn't it time your schools got involved? WisdomHarbor.com, creating America's next greatest generation, starting with your hometown. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on The Professional Noticer. And as you know, we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. We have that today. We have a longtime friend of mine who was like the youngest person I ever saw retire. He retired when he was like 16 or something like that. Not really, but he's been a very dear friend that he and his family to my family. And he's like oddly famous. And so I begged him to come on today. He has written a book, and I don't know if he's retired again, but he's doing things that I just like. Let me just say it. Doug is the former head of global energy at Morgan Stanley and Evercore on Wall Street for 3 decades. He can retire if he wants to. He was ranked as the number 1 or number 2 integrated oil analyst a record 20 times and a member of the All-America Research Team 24 times. He currently serves on the board of directors of Phillips 66, Mississippi State University, and Third Gear Energy Fund. He has a BS in petroleum engineering from Mississippi State, an MBA from Rollins College, and get this, he's a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary. How about that? Please welcome my good friend, Doug Terreson. Hey, Doug.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Man, I am excited that you're here. I always love telling people, he has a degree from Dallas Theological Seminary.
Yeah. Well, I love spending time with you, Andy, as you know, and we go so far back, and it's just always a treat to be with you.
You know, we watched our kids grow up together and had some great times together with those kids. And so, we still live down the street from each other. And so, of course, that's like your 10th house or something, you know. But I am so excited that you're here today. How your family good?
Everybody's great, Andy, and you know, Edie's doing fine. You know, the kids are off, kind of doing their thing, and so we keep our fingers crossed, you know, because you know something could change and somebody could call you in tears or what have you. But you know, God has really blessed us, and I'm delighted that your family's doing so well too. I'm just really proud of the husband and the father and the parent that you are. And I've learned a lot from you over the years. I really have.
Well, you're kind to say so. But, one of the most, I guess the craziest thing that I look at your family is I'm just amazed that Todd has grown up to have a corporate job and be happy and passionate with it, because I just thought Todd and Adam are two peas in a pod. I thought Todd will be fishing every day. Because Todd liked it as much as Adam does.
Well, Andy, probably every time you saw Todd for the first 18 years of his life, he's wearing, flip-flops and, fishing shirts and what have you. And they were, really fabulous fishermen. But at the same time, he goes to Baylor University. I think he finds his passion in finance. He gets a job with ConocoPhillips. And he tells me he can't wait to go to work every day. And so he's been there for 3 years. He loves the company. It's a great company. It's one of the best oil companies in the world, in my opinion. And so he's kind of found his way, and he's doing fabulously. But he does get back in town every now and then. And when he does, I make sure I have the boat filled up with gas because I know what's next.
Yeah,
but
fresh fish. That's what's next.
Fresh fish is what's next, and it's not me having to spend all that time in the Gulf of Mexico putting them in the boat.
Man, well, that's just awesome. I just thought Doug and Edie have a son and twin daughters.
No, 2 daughters. So we have Virginia. Virginia also graduated Baylor last year, and she's getting a master's in nursing from UAB, and she wants to be a psych nurse practitioner. And so she's doing fine. And then our youngest child, Catherine, graduates from Sewanee in May. And so anyway, she's planning on moving to Washington, D.C., and so, thumbs up for all of our kids right now. Everybody's doing great.
Yeah.
And Edie's doing fabulous too. Edie is the chairman of the board of Mobile Ballet over in Mobile. So she's keeping very busy with that. They're thriving under her leadership, which is a surprise to no one. But they also have a great team as well, to be completely fair. She's also on the board of Pritchard Prep, our friend Sandy Stimson.
Yeah.
And she's also on the board of the St. Paul's Foundation, which is where our kids went to high school in Mobile. So she's keeping busy too. So
wow, good grief! Yeah, you guys got a lot going on, and then you wrote a book.
I did write a book, and you gave me a lot of guidance with that book, and it was one of those things where I got a call from a person by the name of Bethany McLean like 4 years ago, and Bethany wrote The Smartest Guys in the Room, which was the Enron book, and then she was the person that was the narrator in the movie. And she came to Fairhope and she said, I'm here to encourage you or convince you to write a book. And I said, well, at the time I was working for Evercore. My hair was on fire every day working on Wall Street. And I just didn't have time to drop what I was doing and do that. And then after I left Evercore in the second half of 2021 and started to join corporate boards, I called her back and I just said, so I'm ready to do this. Do you want to do it? And she said, I'm on another project. I can't. And so it goes back and forth, Andy. And then I decided, you know what? I've got a little time on my hands for the first time in my life. And so I wrote all 75,000 words in 4 months. And you may say, well, that's the easy part. And you're right. It is the easy part because then you have to have editors and you have to have other people. And that takes a little while, but it should take a little while if you want a really positive finished products like all your great books are.
Well, the book is beautiful.
Well, thank you.
It's called Can't Deny It, An Unlikely Wall Street Career and the Calls That Reshaped an Industry.
Mm-hmm.
This is the blow by blow. I mean, when I read this book, I was amazed that you were able to combine as much business experience and as much stories about things that happen as well as your family. I mean, in a minute, I want to ask you about the check that Todd and his buddies won on the boat.
Right.
I just still blows me. Every now and then I'll run across that picture and go, holy cow.
So much fun.
How old was Todd then?
So Todd was 18, and to your point, the Can't Deny It, you may go, well, what is that title even about? And it's a dual meaning title. To your point, I kind of find myself at the epicenter of all these transformational changes in the oil industry during the past 30 years. And partially because I wrote research, which tried to encourage the companies to go in a certain direction. And so you can't deny that I wasn't in the middle of it at the time, really for the last 3 decades. And then, of course, Chapter 9, which is a lot of people's favorite chapter, is about my boat, Can't Deny It, which was a 48-foot Viking, which myself and my captain and my son Todd and 5 of his high school buddies at the age of 17 and 18 go to the Emerald Coast Billfish Classic. We're fishing against 92 boats. There's $2 million in the pot. We go 140 miles south of Destin, and we catch a 700-pound blue marlin. We win the tournament. We're in USA Today. We're on Marlin Magazine. We're in all these different magazines across the Southeast. The boys become famous. Great story, but then they deserted me because they got these great jobs on boats that were in Bermuda and the Bahamas and the Gulf Coast. And so they didn't have anybody to do the work, and I didn't want to do it because I didn't know how to do it. And so I ended up having to sell Can't Deny It. But that's what the book is about. It's really about 2 different things. It's about my career in the oil industry. You can't really deny all these things didn't happen. Number 1, and number 2, my boat, which was called Can't Deny It as well.
And I got to say, I make sure I've got this number right, but those 18-year-olds are holding a $248,000 check.
It wasn't 248,000, but it was close to it. It was actually closer to about 150 all in, but that wasn't the only. I mean, Andy, if you add it up, like a lot of people said, well, it was like an amateur winning the Masters, but we go, no. We think we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
And we fished the other tournaments. We won money in the other one. So all in, we probably won $250,000 fishing these blue water tournaments in the Gulf Coast. And again, we're fishing against pros, but we knew what we were doing. We knew where to go. We had, we used the captain talk, and we also used a lot of the data services out there to decide where to go. And our boys were prepared, and our captain was great. His name is Bo Keogh. He's a local legend.
That is just awesome.
Yeah.
This book is, like I say, it's a combination of stories from your time in business on Wall Street and your time with your family.
Yeah.
So what are you trying to accomplish with this book? What do you hope people take away?
Well, there's a lot of things. The first thing, Andy, and you know this, I am a product of the public school system of the great state of Mississippi.
Yeah, you were not. You weren't born into wealth or privilege.
Oh, I wasn't. I'm from Pascagoula. My dad and my grandfather were engineers, Mississippi State. So I'm a third generation engineer, Mississippi State. But, in high school and college, I was a good student, but I wasn't a great student. I don't think you could find any of my teachers in high school or college who would tell you I would have been a thought leader of any sort at any point in my life. But one thing I'll tell you is that, when I got out of Mississippi State and I started to work for Schlumberger in the oil industry, it was pretty clear that my engineering degree from Mississippi State was going to be really marketable and was going to help me progress in life. Meaning it really kind of taught me how to think. And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who's one of the neurosurgeons for the NFL. And he just said, I told him, I thought my MBA was easy compared to my engineering degree. And he said, Doug, my engineering degree from Mississippi State was harder than medical school. And I said, well, that's kind of the way I felt. So anyway, I show up in the working world with Schlumberger, drilling these oil wells 120 miles offshore. And I could tell I was prepared, meaning you hope that your education prepares you for the work environment. And I was. And then one thing led to another, and I got an MBA, and I went to Wall Street. And I never really felt, from a professional perspective, disadvantaged. In fact, I felt advantaged because of the background that I had academically and the kind of work ethic that I gained along the way. But it was also important to me, no matter how successful I ever became on Wall Street or whatever, to have balance with my personal and my professional life.
Right.
And so, fortunately for me, when I worked for Evercore, even though 99% of my competitors were in New York, screaming at cabbies all day and in the daily political knife fight on Wall Street, I'm living in Fairhope. And, my house is on hole 1 of the golf course. My office is on hole 6. And I think it added years to my career. And it was also
life,
to my life, not being in New York as much. But it also allowed me to see my kids grow up. And that was really important to me. And so with the book, you're right. There's a couple of different things. I wanted people to know that a person with no apparent advantages could go to Wall Street and compete at the highest level. And you could also be a good guy along the way, meaning you could be part of the community. You could, raise good kids, which, every day, as you try to do a little bit better than the next. Some days you do better than others. But I also think there's kind of a theme of giving back and being generous and charitable and mentoring others, which is something you've been great at over the years as well.
Well, I loved this book, and I love the cover, by the way.
Well, thank you.
So you know, what was a pivotal moment for you? What do you think was a pivotal moment in your career, maybe in your family life too?
Yeah. So in my career, I guess the pivotal moment was I get an MBA at a place called Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. And I don't know if you've been to Winter Park, but it's a fabulous place. And then I had a summer internship with a money management firm. But it just so happened that the money management firm that I got my first job with was a place called Sunbanks Capital Management. It's now part of Truist. And the guy who I went to work for was like the top investor in the United States over the previous 10 years, completely lucked into it. His name was Tony Gray. His 10-year performance numbers for his fund were like 22% per year, slightly better than the legendary Peter Lynch at Fidelity. And so I show up there, and I think between my engineering degree and my MBA, I was prepared. But then you get this mentorship from from one of the best investors in the world. And I made a speech at Rollins College a couple of years later, and I just said I think I learned probably 95% of what I needed to know about valuing stocks and picking stocks in my first year of my career at Sunbanks, and it kind of positioned me to succeed. Then I was a person that took advice from Wall Street for about 5 or 6 years managing money. I went from Orlando to Chicago with Kemper and then Putnam in Boston. When I was at Putnam, I was managing the 5th largest energy mutual fund in the world. I was probably 32, 33 years old. Boston's a fabulous place if you're in the money management business. Never thought I'd leave the investment side of the business. But then a guy called me. He was the number one oil analyst on Wall Street, super high profile, obviously. He said, I'm leaving to go run a hedge fund. I want you to come replace me. And I said, well, I'll think about it, but I didn't really want to do it. One thing led to another. I go to Morgan Stanley for 15 years. And obviously at that time, Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs were probably the two elite premier places to be on Wall Street. And then I went to Evercore after taking a year off in 2008, which everybody tells me was a good year to take off.
Yeah.
So
that was your retirement year.
It was one of them. But I had a couple of pivotal events. I mean, I think, starting on the investment side with fabulous mentors, like world-renowned mentors on the buy side, really helped me. And then, getting into Morgan Stanley in the early 90s, it was mostly Ivy League kids, but they needed some oil industry people. So you had Texas A&M and Mississippi State or University of Texas here and there. And then after, being the most highly rated oil analyst for many years at Morgan Stanley, my career I kind of became a brand name or a franchise name. And then with Evercore, it was is that the job I wanted? But then I kind of re-upped and became the top person again. And so there were a couple of pivotal events, but I think that the one starting in Sunbank Capital Management was probably my start. But getting into Morgan Stanley wasn't easy either. And it just really gave me a fabulous platform, and a platform that when I printed research and hit send, it went all over the world. And so everybody in the world who cared about the energy sector knew what my thoughts are, which is a double-edged sword, because when you're right, then your brand builds and builds and builds, but it's also very public and lonely and humiliating when you're
wrong.
When you're wrong, yeah, for sure.
It's like you're the quarterback.
You're the quarterback.
Get the blame.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in the end of the day, when you make these giant calls, people are putting billions of dollars to work behind them a lot of times, and so this is not a joke. It's very serious. and if you make a couple of really high-profile, public mistakes, or you're on CNBC talking about it, or what have you, people remember. And so that's why it's hard to have longevity on Wall Street, because it's really hard to beat the market.
Yeah, I would bet, because I've seen you on MSNBC, on CNN, Fox News. I've seen you on all the stuff. And I would imagine you're right. If somebody sees somebody and they really did put $1 billion in something, right, and then lost a lot, I bet they don't like seeing that face come up.
They don't like seeing that face, but all you can do is do your best and think that you've assessed everything that needs to be assessed to the second or third, derivative. And then you have to go with it. You have to have courage. You have to stick your chin out there. You have to say, I really do think I know something that the rest of the market doesn't. And but that's also how you make a name for yourself, is not really caring as much what the rest of the market thinks, but trusting your judgment and having the courage to be strong with it.
I've got stuff in my books about that,
yeah.
Doug.
Where do you think I learned it from?
Yeah, right. About going the other direction. Yeah. Sheesh. Does this book, for the average person, and I will admit, I sometimes I talk to you and I go home and I'll tell Polly, I said, Doug is too smart for me. I can't understand what he's saying half the time. Right. But it was your purpose to demystify some of this with this book, because you were able to explain it where I didn't feel so stupid.
Yeah. Well, Andy, that was the objective. I mean, you helped me with this book, and I think the first time that I came up with a document, a manuscript, I mean, it was like reading the R encyclopedia, right? And
it kind of was.
And I knew it wasn't commercial, and I knew that, but I also wanted your input because you're my friend, and I value your judgment. And so when I wrote this, I had to balance it in a way, because I knew people in the oil industry and in finance and on Wall Street would love this book, but at the same time, I wanted regular people to want to like it too, and so therefore you have to make it more commercial, and you have to transition the manuscript from being like, oh my gosh, it's like reading the R encyclopedia, to something a normal person would want to read.
And you did. And you did it by putting so many stories into it. And these are exciting stories. This is pretty amazing. And it's almost like reading a thriller when then you find out it's true.
Yeah.
Because you read these things and go, holy cow. But you have to keep reminding yourself, oh, this really happened.
There's some unbelievable stories in there. And the bookend stories, the first one is the era of the super major, where basically my industry, the global oil industry, had gone from 28% of the overall market in 1980 to 14% in 1990 to 4% by 98. And I worked for a year on a report called The Era of the Super Major. And I worked for a year because I wanted everybody in the oil industry to read it and to change direction. And one thing, and what I proposed was that the big oil companies would do a lot better if they combined, and we hadn't seen a merger in the industry in 15 or 20 years. And so there was a lot of pushback and a lot of resistance. Within 6 months, BP and Amoco merged. It was the largest merger in the history of Wall Street at the time, then ExxonMobil, and they fell like dominoes. And guess what happened? Because the companies combined, as I proposed in the era of the super major, and they followed the model that I laid out, S&P Energy goes from 4% of the overall market in 1998 to 14% by 2008, the best move of any sector in the market. Over almost $1 trillion of economic value was created and added to the share prices of those companies. And so that was a fabulous experience for me, Andy, having my name on that and creating the phrase super major. And then the other bookend story was a more recent one. It's called The Pledge for Greater Capital Discipline and Enhanced Corporate Governance. And the industry was misallocating capital. And I basically said, you should sell, investor community, you should probably think about selling these companies until they adopt a model that's going to create economic value. And we went back and forth for a couple of years, but one thing led to another. And by 2020, all the companies had adopted the model that I sought. And so November 9th of 2020, I basically say, it's been about 7 years, but we have all these companies that have adopted the model. And so instead of me being negative on the energy sector, it's time for me to turn positive. And you say, well, why did you bring up November 9th of 2020? Well, because that's the day that I upgraded the energy sector. I went from being negative to being positive. And as an analyst, you always try to pick the bottom. You always try to buy high, buy low, and sell high. You don't think that you're going to get within a quarter or a month. But would you believe that November 9th of 2020 was not only the lowest point in S&P Energy versus the overall market in my 35-year career? Meaning I picked the exact bottom to the day. Stocks went up 14% that day, which was basically the market saying, oh my gosh, Terreson's turning positive. Maybe I should be long. But the story gets better. About 3 months later, I get a call from one of my counterparts at Crude Chronicles, which is a consultancy. They do excellent work. And they said, Doug, this is really creepy. But not only did you pick the exact day of the bottom in your 35-year career on Wall Street, you picked the exact day of the bottom going back to when they started keeping records in 1911. And so, Andy, and that's so improbable given the intricacies and vagaries of markets, and they go up and they go down. But to pick the exact day of the bottom in any sector, in any market, anywhere in the world, going back to 1911, is kind of creepy. It's a little eerie. It's the equivalent of you getting struck by lightning more than twice in your life. Not that I ever want you to get struck by lightning, not much less twice, but once. But so there's some really, great stories in there. And it kind of feels, a lot of it was kind of an out-of-body situation, as if I was a person maybe being used to make these calls, because they were just so
creepy to some, godly to others.
Improbable, so highly improbable, and it could have been, godly. And listen, you and I both have been, so blessed, and we've had fabulous things happen in our lives, and we can't exactly explain some of them. Those are two of them, and those were two of the most transformative moments in the energy sector in the last 30 years.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, across the board, how much money was generated that day? Do you know?
Oh gosh, tens of billions, I'm sure. I mean, if the the sector's up 14%, 50 billion, 75 billion. But then it got better, because not only was it the bottom, but they had fabulous performance for the next 2 or 3 years, and today they're well positioned, and the energy sector is really well positioned relative to the overall market. So the great thing about this book And a lot of people say, well, oh my gosh, how'd you write 75,000 words in 4 months? I mean, you're like sick or something. And I go, no, but you remember, everything that I did in my career was published and timestamped. Like when I hit send with all my research views, they went around the world. And so there's no debate that what I said wasn't said, number one. Number two, if I was quoted in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Economist or what have you, all I had to do is go back and pull the quotes.
Yeah.
Now you had to, put it in the order that you wanted, and you had to get somebody talented like you to edit it. And I did all that, and that takes a little while, but you can't deny that these things didn't happen. But at the same time, it does feel a little creepy that some of those things happened the way that they did.
Yeah. Amazing.
Highly improbable.
One of the themes of this book is leadership under pressure.
Mm.
So what was a key high stake experience there? I guess probably that day would have been one. But how does the lessons of leadership, how does that affect you with your family and today with the board you're on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so there's another story in the book about the chaos of 2008. And in 2008, you may remember that the stock market kept going up and up and up, and the oil price was going up and up and up. And the work that I did suggested that it was a bubble and that the oil price was going to decline quite a bit. It went to $110 per barrel, and I made this call in March of that year and just said, we're going to probably, end up at about 95. Then it goes to 150, and so Morgan Stanley said, it's obvious you've lost your touch a little bit, and so it's probably time for us to part ways, kind of thing. Which was fine for me because I was living in Houston. I wanted to move here anyway, and I just wanted an amicable, agreement kind of thing. But during that period, because I was the number one oil analyst on Wall Street. I had to stick to my conviction. I had to have courage. Everybody, guys on Wall Street were saying the oil price is going to 150 and then 200 and then 250. And I just sat there and I said, my analysis suggests 95. So anyway, we get to August of 2008. Oil peaks at $147 per barrel. I had left Morgan Stanley 3 days later, and guess what happened thereafter? Well, it collapsed. It went to $37 per barrel by Christmas. Ended up averaging $98 per barrel for the year, so I missed it by a full 3%. And obviously 2008 was kind of a shambles, but it kind of taught me to trust your conviction, to make sure you've done the work. And just because others don't believe in what you're doing doesn't mean you should change your position. Now, if part of your thesis begins to unravel, then you have to be intellectually honest and say, you know what, I thought these 5 things were going to happen. They're not happening. I made a mistake. But I never felt that, and so I stuck with it. And sure enough, to have missed the oil price in 2008, which was probably one of the most volatile years of the past century, by a full 3%, was another one of those kind of creepy, eerie situations. But it told me to trust my instincts, have courage, and be a leader. And leadership, I think, is so underrated overall. Whether it's my wife at the ballet, or guys coaching football at the high school over here in Orange Beach. Great leadership is really hard to come by, and it just really requires a lot of effort, because leadership is effectively influencing people who may or may not have your same interest in mind to do what you would like them to do, but at the same time being responsible for the outcome. Meaning, if it ends up being a positive outcome, and you're the leader, then you have to accept the responsibility and say, we made a mistake. We're going to learn, but we're going to do better next time. And so it's difficult, but I've just always felt, comfortable, trying to lead, not because I thought I was smarter than everybody else, because I know that I'm not, but just because there's a general lack of it, I think. But anyway, it's great when you can see it in practice, great leadership.
I hesitate to ask this next question, but because just like, hang on here, where do you see the opportunities today?
Yeah. Well, so it seems to me that in the United States, that our government is really concerned about the future of our financial position. And so it looks like that these tariffs are going to lead to slower economic growth, at least for a period of time. It also looks like slower economic growth is going to lead to lower oil prices, lower inflation, lower dollar. And I think the objective here is for the 10-year bond, which Secretary Bessent talks about quite a bit, to go to lower levels. And if so, then we can refinance or restructure our debt, which is really the only way that we're going to be on a sustainable path going forward, which is really important for our kids. I mean, it's important for Austin and for Todd to have a sustainable future and for the dollar to be healthy and for our economy to be healthy. So I understand what they're trying to accomplish.
Wait a minute. Stop.
Yeah.
I would just like to say, I am sitting here with the one person on the planet who understands what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, God, I have conversations with my friends who are like, I know, what's he doing? Well, it's working out, and then, these people are going but it's crazy. But you feel like, you understand what they're trying to accomplish? You feel like they're on track?
I do think that, Andy. I think that the tariffs are going to slow the economy. Lower oil prices have a pretty good chance of ending 3 wars. Number 1, Russia-Ukraine, because Russia's funding it with oil. Number 2, Israel-Iran, code for Gaza. Number 3, Saudi Arabia, Iran, code for Yemen and the Houthis, because obviously Russia and Iran are oil-dependent economies. So if the economy slows because of tariffs, we have lower oil prices, we could wake up with 3 bloodbath wars being over. Then the dollar declines, then interest rates decline, then we can refinance and restructure our debt. We can eliminate some of these deficits. Whether or not they're going to be successful, Andy, I don't know. The market's saying that they haven't thought through all of these items, but I think at the same time, they're on the right path. There might have to be some adjustments made along the way, which is always the case. But no, I do think that's exactly what the narrative is. You're not going to see any government official spell that out on CNBC today. But I think that's the path, and I don't see anything out there that tells me I'm wrong about this.
Wow. We need to cut out that little clip right there. That is awesome. So, now this is like a real future kind of thing, or maybe it's not because it's like here right now. But how is AI going to affect what you have done and what you are doing? And I mean, where do you see that going?
It's truly amazing. And Andy, I think it's getting better. And when I was writing my book, as you know, you get to some places and some parts of it just aren't right. And you can ask AI. You can just say, I need some bridge content on between paragraphs 2 and 3. Just some ideas, because I've stared at this for days, weeks, months, and I just can't. It doesn't pop into my head. And you can attach your manuscript, and by the time you hit send, it's giving you ideas of bridge content on page 78 between the second and the third paragraph. And so, to me, I didn't get to use it that much because my book was published a while back, kind of thing. But I think it's going to improve lots of different outcomes. I mean, it's truly amazing. Now, it's not going to replace wisdom, meaning there's 2 different things here. There's this, it's fabulous intellectual capacity, but there's also going to be judgment required and relationships required in business as well. And so I think a mix between, the 2, the productivity tools that are going to be generated by AI in really every business, but also using your own judgment. And I think right now it's, probably 70%, judgment and 30% in wisdom and 30% the tools that you can get from AI. But, just some of the things you can do we're talking about books today. And so I just gave you an example.
What the example you gave, I think it's a thing that gets reiterated to me every now and then, and I keep forgetting it. And then somebody like you will say something like this, and it reminds me that AI is a tool, and if you don't know what to ask it, it's not going to tell you anything. Because
that's right.
That idea about I need some bridge content, that never occurred to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, man, what a great thing to ask it.
Yeah.
And I had a thing the other day, and I thought, I wonder if I can put this list of 300 people in here and if it'll alphabetize it. And of course, it did very quickly. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that was just a matter of me thinking what do I need it to do?
I'm rarely disappointed by it. And again, with my book, to your point, the 75,000 words are already written. You just needed an idea for an extra 11 on your bridge content. But it goes so much farther beyond that. I mean, and the other thing, Andy, is that you go to Poe, which is kind of a place where all these different bots are held, and there's like a bot for everything. Now, some are better than the others, but I don't know. I think it's transformative. And so the one reason not to get too negative about the market is that this is one of the greatest, I think, inventions of our time, and it's really going to improve productivity. And people have talked about, well, the market's overvalued. Well, just remember that when things have high valuation multiples, it can be okay if their future returns are going to be better. Returns on investment are going to be better, and it does look like that it will be the case for that. So there's a balance there. But no, it's truly amazing, and every time I use it, I'm amazed more. But you're right; it's garbage in, garbage out. I mean, you have to have the 75,000 words before you get the 11 that it gives you an idea about, and then it has to be your work, because we don't want to plagiarize, of course.
Right.
So
I love playing with it. I was talking to Rick Burgess the other day, and they were trying to figure out something to do with AI on their show, and so I said, maybe improbable conversations, because I said, what if Taylor Swift is releasing a new album and she gets her PR advice from Bear Bryant? And so we had this whole conversation with Bear Bryant and Taylor Swift going on, watching this. It's pretty neat. And so, but once again, whatever you can imagine, you just got to be able to imagine.
That's right.
That's
right. It starts with your imagination. It starts with with the book. It starts with, okay, you wanted to write this book and you wrote it, but you can make it. You can also make it better. And Andy, writing doesn't flow for most people like it does for you, which is it's easy for you. For the rest of us, I'm a petroleum engineer with an MBA, with a degree in theology, and so I'm like, what are you even thinking about doing? Writing a book? Like that's completely okay. Fine, that's it. But for normal people that are unlike you, that are not as creative, it's a great tool.
Yeah,
I mean, it
really
mathematicians, just really anybody.
I want to ask you this: you mentioned judgment and wisdom, and how important. I mean, you're on the boards of one institution, two companies, probably more than, I don't know. But how important is the culture of the organization, or the culture, and I'm talking about top to bottom, how important is that to a company's success?
Oh, so it's so important. And I think it starts with leadership. It starts at the top. In fact, if you think about, my career, I mean, I've basically done nothing but assess the potential of some of the biggest corporations in the world for 35 years, okay? And it's very rare that you see a company hit on all cylinders and completely thrive, not only internally, but externally, unless they pay a lot of attention to their culture. And what does it start with? Well, it's being kind, it's being humble, it's trying to have performance, holding people accountable, being fair. It's super, super important, meaning culture is really kind of the common denominator of almost every successful company. I'm not saying that some companies can't be successful with a poor culture, but I think it's also probably a matter of time before they have an accident, they start losing their people. Your human capital is very important. Turnover is very disruptive. And if you have a really positive, strong corporate culture, like we talked about with ConocoPhillips earlier, or like with Phillips 66, where I serve on the board, you're more likely to thrive and be successful. But it's not easy to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and have that positive corporate culture. But I think it's really, really important to your success, not only as a corporation, but also in the stock market.
All right. What would you say? What would you say? This is just out of the blue. What would you say to Boeing? Having lost $6 billion in the last couple of quarters, and even the new CEO says redo our culture to get back to what we used to be.
Well, to me, Andy, what that shows is that he gets it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not as close to Boeing because, the airline industry was not really my area. The oil industry was, but, the common denominator here is that the new CEO basically came in. He realized that, the culture wasn't fostering the type of behaviors and performance and accountability that great companies need to succeed. And it sounds to me as if that was his objective from day one, was to change that. And I think that demonstrates that he's probably going to be an astute leader.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. So, I just I want to make sure that I'm getting everything that I thought to comment on about this book. And the overriding, I know you. And so the overriding theme to me was maybe different than it would be for other people. My overriding theme was, here's a guy who came from a normal family, got a normal education, made kind of normal grades, and has ended up, on top of the world in a particular industry. And so how much do you think, kind of starting at the beginning, had to do with your success? I mean, we all want to start our children at a different place, but that wasn't your case.
Yeah.
That wasn't my case. So how much do you think that had to do with your mindset that you were able to develop? And why did you develop a mindset that you could do it instead of a mindset that, well, this is the way we are and so we're always going to be?
Yeah. So, one thing I'll say about my parents is, we had a really fun, free childhood. Spent a lot of time in the Gulf of Mexico and what have you. But my mom had us in church every single Sunday. And, I think that
culture,
and also the thing that you can learn from the church and from the Bible. And it kind of gives you a set of guidelines that, make it pretty easy to prosper, I think. And you don't always get to do what you want to do. It's kind of what you should do. But at the same time, when you have really hard times in your life, it just makes it so much easier. There's something there that you can rely on. And so, I think that aspect was really important to me. It was really important to my wife, and it's really important to how we raise our kids.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Andy, there are other things, and you can say, well, that's biblical too. Just be kind to people. Be humble. You don't know what people are going through, but even if you did know what they were going through, why not be kind and be humble? And like I told my son when he worked for ConocoPhillips, I said, Todd, you're going to find people that have better academic credentials than you, and I'm the great example of that because a lot of people did. But nobody outworked me. I wasn't going to let anybody outwork me, and I was going to be prepared, and I was going to be an asset and part of the solution and a culture carrier wherever I worked. And I like playing on teams. I think in my book I talked about I've coached 24 different teams, whether it's, little boys baseball, girls softball, intercity basketball in Houston. I like teams. I like role playing. I like leadership. I like being around athletes. And I don't think that corporations are different than that. I mean, and so you can learn a lot, by playing on teams and by being a coach that apply to Wall Street, even at the highest level. Now, you may say, well, that's interesting. You say that in a business like Wall Street that's known for, a knife fight every day and people being mercenary. That's fine.
Right.
But that didn't mean I had to do it.
Right.
And I didn't do it. I wanted people to say, well, gosh, Doug's one of the most renowned oil analysts in the histories of Wall Street, but he's one of the nicest guys around too. And so I wanted to set an example. It was important to me. And part of the reason why is because I've learned from, going to church, from spending time with my believer friends like yourself and others, that you can be successful and be a good person too. And that's kind of the way I've tried to work it. And again, I wasn't going to let anybody outwork me, and I hope my kids don't either, because that sense of accomplishment can't be given to you. And man, it's such a great feeling, as you know.
Man, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
You for being here. We will put, where do you want us to buy this book?
Amazon's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, just go to Amazon and buy it. The book's done, really well. People like it. Like I said, I've had some people in the oil industry and investors say, I've read this book 3 times. And so that's flattering. But I also like to hear that people that don't know anything about the oil industry or Wall Street say, like you did, like I really enjoyed your book.
Yeah.
I've heard that there's a little bit too much detail in particular areas, but there has to be detail because there has to be, Andy, because then the experts that are in the oil industry or on Wall Street would say, if there weren't detail, he just got lucky. Well, I don't think I got lucky. And so the detail helps you to justify exactly what happened, make it airtight, and you can't deny it didn't happen in the end, and for the reasons we talked about.
That is awesome. How can we help you?
Well, you already have. Spending time with you is always something I look forward to, and this situation as well. And I'm glad you're doing great. And, I always learn from you, Andy. I always do.
Well, thank you for being a part of this. And we will have all how to get in touch with Doug on the show notes. And that's the book. Can't Deny It. You can get it on Amazon right now. And I know you're already thinking of somebody that needs to read this. So go ahead and buy 2, one for you and one for them, and give a great gift that people will really enjoy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I forgot to mention, you asked me the question, I started talking about something else, but it's on DougTerreson.com.
Okay, DougTerreson.com. And that'll be
easy.
on our show notes too.
That'd be great.
Thank you, buddy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing what tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limper. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Book paddles for the cast and crew provided by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by BarkingCat.com. Are you a dog person who is oddly attracted to cats? Do you wish your dog was more independent? Contact the good people at BarkingCat.com. Our scientists have created a genetically modified dog that possesses cat-like instincts and behavior. We can promise you a puppy that will grow up to be furtive, sneaky, and as disingenuous as an animal can be. Your new pet can live for years without commercial dog food at BarkingCat.com. When your dog is hungry, he'll just kill something. No more letting the dog in and out of the house. Your new dog will use a litter box. And no more wearing yourself out throwing a stick or a tennis ball. Simply tie a piece of yarn to the back of a chair and allow the yarn to hang free, almost to the floor. Your dog will entertain himself for hours. That's BarkingCat.com. Order yours today.